So, my significant other has an adult daughter from another relationship. She absolutely despises me, and she says that I'm the reason her mother and father are divorced, but it's totally not the reason. The reason is they don't go well together. But now she's desperate for a place to live, and my husband even told me, hey, we don't have to let her stay here if you're uncomfortable. But I thought that would be wrong. I wanted us to grow closer. But guys, now I'm realizing it's the biggest mistake of my life. Let me just fill you in on everything she's done thus far. I've seen and heard a lot of stories about children from divorced couples being mean to their parents, subsequent significant others, but I honestly didn't think that I'd ever relate to it this much. Maybe because I always thought it was only literal kids that do such. Before my husband Jared, I'd never been married before. But he, on the other hand, had married his high school girlfriend, and they have one daughter, Isis, who's currently 25 years of age, and also Jared and I got married 7 years ago when she was just barely 18. I still kind of expected her to be sensible enough to not act like a petulant child. But my expectation was certainly not met when I found out that she was not playing around. I initially thought she was just being careful around me, which would have been normal because we're strangers. But no, this girl hated me. So much that she once went into the bathroom and poured a whole gallon of bleach into the bathtub after I ran the shower. Yeah, my life is like those cliche movies where the kids of divorced parents are rude. The only difference is that my stepdaughter is a literal adult who somehow believes that I had something to do with her father divorcing her mom, just because I used to work with him while they were still married. The thing is, I had never once noticed Jared until he spoke to me 8 years ago. I honestly didn't even know we were co-workers because the company's really big, and I tend to mind my own. However, a contract threw us both together, and we kind of hit things off from the start. Mind you, I didn't even know he was a divorcee until our second date. So I don't know why or who told Miss Isis that her father left her mom because of me. Well, this part can be bad. It's been 7 whole years since I married this wonderful man, and his daughter still refuses to acknowledge that I'm even here. I'm just going to get up and leave because she's been terrible towards me, even though she always finds and takes every opportunity to belittle me and haul stereotypical insults, most of them border literal racism. This part can be extremely exhausting, but not surprising, especially since we live in a society where racial discrimination still exists to this day and age. She used to stay with her mother and only visit every weekend until she went to college. Life was most peaceful during her stay in college, and I'm sorry if it sounds terrible. Earlier last year, Isis contacted her father and told him that she lost her job and she needed a place to stay. Jared instantly refused when she mentioned she wanted to stay with us, and even though she's been nothing but horrible towards me, I still questioned his decision. That was my first mistake. Well, my husband explained that he knew his daughter better than I did, and she'd made life harder for me if she moved in. But did I listen? No. He told her to hit her mother up and go stay with her, but her mom, Nicole, said that she was about to be evicted, and therefore Isis could not move in with her at that point. I don't know if that lady was telling the truth, but because I was slightly delusional, I begged and pleaded. So Jared would let her stay. Even if it was just a few months, at least until she could get a new job. I don't know why I somehow thought that perhaps this was an opportunity for me to show her how not bad I am. Well, kinda, like a more direct attempt at winning her approval and providing that I'm a nice person. Well, it didn't work. Things got progressively worse, even worse than Jared predicted. There were constant arguments between my stepdaughter and me, and almost all of them were because of things I can't even remember. She'd even sometimes try to make me and my husband fight or clash over insignificant things, but thankfully he's mature and aware because none of her plans ever worked. Yeah, we'd get into a homeless little bickering now and again, but it was never because Isis's negative efforts paid off. Like, she would just actively pick a fight for no reason. Just straight yell at clouds and make up scenarios just to justify her nastiness. And although I've constantly told her that there was nothing going on between Jared and me, when he was married to her mom, she refused to believe me. I first tried to keep this from my husband, but I was slightly ashamed that he had been right about her making things harder for me. But it got to a point where he found things out himself. I finally made some audible noise when I noticed that Isis had been going through my personal stuff. She would enter Jared's bedroom after we left for work, and she would actively ransack the whole room and leave it messy. I was really getting paranoid, and my patience was running thin. But I held on. Jared was probably waiting for me to tell him to send her away since I was the one who asked that she stay with us. I didn't say such a thing, though, and God knows I wasn't going to say anything about it either. But then she did something that really raised an alarm. Isis said she wanted her father to help her get another job, but she constantly refused every opportunity he presented to her. It was beginning to look like she actually didn't need a job, but I still wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. So I started looking for openings for her. I was able to find 3 opportunities, which she also refused before I finally decided to give up. Last week, I kinda bumped into Isis leaving Jared in my bedroom, and she seemed suspiciously sweet and even spoke to me in a tone that was almost condescending. I probably should have known that something was up, but for some reason I waved this as an unusual encounter, and I just pushed it aside. So we normally have a family dinner over at Jared's family's house, and almost all his family members were present. And for some reason, Nicole would always invite herself over, since my husband has a pretty mixed family. She never really sticks out, unless you seriously consider the fact that she's his ex-wife, who should be living her own life outside her failed marriage. These gatherings always go well, regardless of her presence, except this very one. Because everyone seems to be looking at me weird. Like, I can't fully explain the looks with words, but they were a mix between disgust, pity, and disapproval. The last part was mostly from the older members of the family. Nobody would directly speak or look at me when they talked, and almost all of the inserts of the conversations I said were ignored. My husband noticed the difference too because he kept giving me comforting but slightly surprised looks. I was getting really frustrated with the way that they were all treating me and why, until Nicole finally answered my inner question. So, Ray, how's the whole surrogacy thing going? The whole table went utterly silent, and she asked this, and it's been a huge understatement to say that I was completely shocked, especially because this wasn't something she was supposed to know. How does she know? And why was she asking me amongst all these people? When I asked what she meant by that, she went ahead to clarify that Isis had told her that Jared and I were trying for a baby through surrogacy because of my condition, and that she was oh so sorry. The condition is the fact that I have something called uterine aplasia, which simply means my uterus is underdeveloped, which makes it basically impossible for me to carry my own kid. Jared and I have been trying to get a surrogate since I want at least 2 children, but this information has been highly confidential. Nobody besides me and my hubby knew about it, so my only guess is that Isis somehow found documents or perhaps an ultrasound, and shared the information with her mom. It was most likely the day that I saw her coming out, and my mom and my husband's room, I waited 2 whole days after the incident before deciding to post my story here because I've been beyond overwhelmed. I'm really big on having a family, so are members of Jared's home. And the news of my infertility has made them switch how they actually treat me, and I don't know what to do. Update number 1, 4 days later. Hey, I want to first thank you to the people who commented. I wasn't expecting more than a few of those, let alone more positive ones. Secondly, I feel like a lot of people do have issues with comprehension. Because how are you going to read or hear something and then respond to it negatively without actually understanding the whole thing? I see comments saying I didn't tell my hubby about my condition, and I'm honestly curious about which part of the story gave them that hint. Was it something I said? Or did you all just jump to that conclusion for no reason? Did y'all just miss the part where I said Jared and I are trying for surrogacy? This directly means that he's aware of my condition. So where are all those assumptions coming from? Please, let's all read to understand and not just reply. It's been 4 days since I posted my story here, and a lot has happened already. I fully admit now that it was partly my fault for believing that I could change a person's opinion about me, by trying harder. Please don't do that, it never really works. Some members of Jared's family have definitely gotten past the initial shock of the announcement I didn't make, and 3 of his aunts called me 2 days ago to talk about some herbs they got from back home in Jamaica, herbs that they believe will somehow help with my infertility. I don't know, but I laughed really long and hard at it. But then I calmly tried to explain to the sweet old ladies in simple terms that what I have is something only specific kinds of surgeries would slightly help with, but they refused to understand. So I'm currently stuck between deciding to humor them or keeping my feet down. Guys, I would appreciate any advice on this. Update to 2 days later. Hey, I know it's not been that long since my first update, but something happened, and I kind of need some advice on how to handle it. And for someone busy throwing around stereotypes about women like me, she was for sure the one being extremely loud and improper like a Karen. Her problem is that she believes Jared only kicked Isis out of the house because of me, as if he is incapable of making decisions that benefit me, his wife. I told her this, but it just seemed to fuel her even more. She was obviously looking for something and perhaps even expecting a physical exchange, but I refrained from it because I'll never roll in the mud with a pig. But then she didn't really stop her from spewing so many things that I thought were a secret. Things I'm pretty sure her daughter told her, and it's very obvious that I've been the topic of their conversation more than once. Probably still am. And right now I've had quite enough. Am I being too dramatic for considering involving the authorities? And what should I even report if I'm to do so? I genuinely felt scared for my life yesterday, and considering she might well get away with any harm she does to me because of her race, I don't really want to take the chance. Anyways, I let her embrace herself until security escorted her out. Even though I was practically fuming, I don't know who my real parents are, but my current ones adopted me when I was 7 from an orphanage. This is something only a handful of people in my life know, but I'm guessing Isis found out the copy of my adoption papers. Why Nicole would want to use this as a gotcha is something I don't understand, but dare I say she succeeded? I'm very happy that Mr. and Mrs. Jafar adopted me, but this subject, it's still kinda touchy, you know? Update 3, 5 days later. Hey guys, so let me jump right into it. I'm really grateful for all your comments and support, they really mean a lot. So in my last update, I mentioned that I'm no longer going to be on the defensive side anymore. And I'm sorry if this decision goes against some of your suggestions, but still it stands. I'm done trying to calm myself because I'm afraid of fitting the negative stereotype that most people have. You know, I also said that I was considering just getting the authorities involved, and after I told my husband about Nicole's unexpected visit, he drove over to the station to open a case file for himself. He also talked about hiring personal protection for me, but I refuse, because I think it's still too early for that. I mean, am I wrong? Also, I already talked to the lady who works in the company Isis was fired from, but I didn't explicitly tell her why I needed the information I was asking for. Instead, I told her that my stepdaughter needs a recommendation letter from them for her new job, and that she was a bit hesitant to contact them, which was why I took it upon myself to do it. The woman, let's just call her Mandy, she laughed really hard at my statement before she proceeds to tell me why she was even fired in the first place. According to her, Isis had been very aggressive and incompetent at work, but what finished the whole thing off was the fact that she's been caught trying to steal money from her company's account. She and the head finance had planned the whole thing, but luckily they were busted before they actually went through with it. See, I knew something was up. Perhaps she's only refusing the opportunities her father's been giving her because she's afraid that her last job would find a way to jeopardize the new one. Also, last night, my husband told me she's been discreetly begging him to fund her plans for a new job, like literally sending her to school. And from his tone, he seemed like he was considering it, but just needed to know if it was okay with me. Now, I'm no wicked witch of the West, but this was definitely my opportunity to get slightly even. And I did. I told my husband not to send her to beauty school. Not that he doesn't have the money to. I just didn't want him to. Am I bad for that? Update for 3 days later. Hey guys, I said I was going to give an update, so here it is. In the last update, I said I was going to ask Isis about the claim her ex-workplace made, and I did. Yesterday evening, I made sure everybody who mattered was in that room while I did it. First of all, for those who keep saying that I'm taking things too far, I'm pretty sure y'all won't be saying the same thing if you were in my shoes. I'm not being dramatic, and the negative comments about me would not make me feel bad either because I'm not a bad person. Most of you just don't like when a person decides to fight back. And perhaps it's because inwardly you're bullies. But like I said, that's not going to stop me. Yesterday during dinner, everything was fairly good. I finally told Jared's aunts that I would not be drinking the herb they prescribed. Mainly because most of you told me not to do that, as it would give them a false sense of hope and might lead to further disappointment when it doesn't work. They seemed a bit disappointed, but aside from that, they accepted it. Nicole was of course there too, and after she and my mother-in-law took turns trying to humble me, as usual, I turned to Isis and loudly asked her how far she had gotten with her job hunting. She didn't reply, but I honestly wasn't expecting her to. My husband, however, repeated the question to her, clearly annoyed that she ignored me, and she did not respond this time. She said she wasn't having much luck and that most of the job offers refused to employ her after the interview. Well, that's when I hit her with the last job claim, asking her why she thought it was okay to steal money from such a large corporation, knowing full well that her father needed to have a clean public image for his reputation and his company. I kinda got deja vu with how quiet the table got after this. And yes, Nicole was glaring daggers at me from across the table. Isis, of course, tried to deny it, by hurling insults at me predictably. It was then that I pulled out the receipts and video recording of her and the company's ex-head of finance, planning on how to move $2 million from the company's main account. Now Jared's clients invest millions with him, so imagine how they would feel to know that his daughter was a criminal. It's probably a long shot, but this could very well affect their trust in him. Right. After all, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, I was right. He was beyond furious, and I watched the whole thing without regret. He lashed out at everyone, including his mom, who was telling him to calm down, and then he told Isis and her mother to leave. At first, I thought he meant they should leave the family house, but he quickly clarified. He meant that they should leave his life, his family, and the room. Even for a split second, I thought it was a bit too harsh and that he was speaking from a place of anger. But then Isis got up, moved towards me, and slapped me. I was able to return the dirty slap before Jared moved her out of my face and practically shoved her out the door. Final update 6 days later. Well, in my last 2 updates, I mentioned that I refused my husband's offer to get me personal security. Well, I regret it and take that back right now because I might actually need it. I had a meeting with a surrogate, and after posting, I decided to leave work early so we could meet. All my car tires had been slashed. The company's building is in good neighborhood, so I knew it was not really an ordinary attack. To further confirm my suspicion that the attack had something to do with Nicole, I got a text from a strange number saying that I was going to regret destroying their family and making her man turn his back on her and their daughter. Like, none of these things ever happened. Is this what the whole toxic obsessive ex thing looks like? Because it is scarier than I thought I'd ever been so dangerously fixated on a man before, and thank goodness. I called Jared and he immediately contacted authorities. He was the one who drove over to my workplace and took me to the appointment with the surrogate. Everything went well in that aspect because last week we went to meet up with a fertility specialist to discuss the whole thing. And she's going to start they call ovulation induction next week. After the appointment ended, we both went over to the police station to find out what was up with Nicole. Sure enough, she's in custody. That was a few hours ago. She seemed eerily unhinged, like her eyes were too bright and wild. And she kept crying, trying to move towards Jared even when being restrained. I seriously thought she was not okay upstairs, and perhaps I never noticed this before because of how prim and proper she was. She'd carefully mask her insanity under the passive-aggressive remarks, always acting and bursting into tears first, even if she was the one at fault. But although a major part of my mind was sure that she was not okay mentally, a small part still wondered if she was just pretending. Well, perhaps to evade the consequence of her action, because the officers mentioned something about taking a look at the cameras in the parking lot, the CCTV, just to confirm whether she was the one who destroyed my car or not. I think this whole thing has given me some sort of paranoia, and I'm not exactly sure what to do about it. Like, all I want to is to have my own family and be happy with my husband, and that wish is about to come true. But this unhealthy obsession that my husband's ex-wife has with him is sucking all the joy I should be having. I'm really stressed right now, and I don't know what to do except wait. I don't want this to turn into one of those stories where there are different things the subject could have done to help themselves, but they only realize this when it's almost too late. Well, Nicole was actually found mentally fit. She was just, quote, acting crazy. She's also been given a restraining order to stay the heck away from me and Jared, and she was put on probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution for vandalizing my car.